Buying a painting franchise or any home service franchise is a huge mistake, and in this video, I'm gonna show you why. If you're even considering buying a franchise, watch this video before you invest a small fortune, before you get locked in and stuck, and before you learn everything I'm about to tell you the hard way. So a couple disclaimers before we get started. First, I'm not gonna name any names so that I don't get any trouble. Second, I don't think, as I go through this video, I don't think that the people operating a franchisor business where they're selling franchises are bad people. I don't think they necessarily have bad intent. I think that there's probably good people who are running a really horrible model called a franchise, and people are pretty good at convincing themselves that what they're doing is good, but I think the model itself has huge, huge flaws. I also have had a lot of experience working with people who have bought a franchise. So I coach hundreds of painting contractors, and I work with dozens of franchise owners who have bought a painting franchise, and then they pay a lot of money for my coaching program because they're not getting what they thought they were getting from their franchise. And a lot of the stories I've heard are borderline offensive, truly upsets me, how people are being treated, what they were sold, what was promised, what was actually delivered. It's insane, the stories I've heard, and so I wanna make this video so you can see two sides of the story. The franchisor who is selling franchises doesn't benefit from telling you the things that I'm gonna tell you, and I think if you're gonna make a huge investment decision like buying a franchise, you should have all the information. So I'm gonna give you the other side that you'll never hear from a franchisor because it doesn't benefit them to tell you all this. Here's 5 of the biggest problems that I see across the table with the franchise model. The first problem is misaligned incentives. In the franchise business, the franchisor gets paid based on the revenue that's driven. So I get 6%, 7%, 8% of the total revenue of your company, whether you're profitable or not. So I have an incentive to get you to spend a lot more on marketing, hire more people, and scale the business's top line revenue regardless of the profit you're making. Then you, as the franchisee, are incentivized to make profit, and those two incentives are not aligned. You make different decisions to maximize profit in a business than you do to maximize top line revenue. So there's one franchise that I know, I coach at least 5 of the franchisees that work and have bought a franchise from this organization, and they claim their average location does over $1 million a year, which I believe is true. What I also know is, based on the 5 people that I coach, $1 million a year is about what their break-even point is because of the model that the franchisor is promoting. They're telling them to spend a certain amount of money on marketing, to hire certain marketing agencies, to hire people that they can't yet staff. And so what I also know is the overhead on those companies is so high that the break-even point is somewhere around $80,000 to $100,000 a month or $1 million a year. So while $1 million a year business sounds really good, if you don't know the profitability and the take home for that business owner, who cares? And so a franchise can say average numbers, but there's certain things in the FTC disclosure agreements that we are gonna get into that mask how successful the business actually is. So the first problem is these misaligned incentives that really doesn't set this up to be a win from the very beginning, because as the franchisor, sometimes I would actually have to make suggestions to my franchisee about scaling the business back, which means I'm actually making less money. So I think that's the first problem. The second problem is overpayment. When you sign up for a franchise, you've got to pay a whole bunch of money up front. And then in most of the agreements with a franchise, there's a lot of other fees and expenses you have to incur to launch the business. They require certain branding, they require certain vehicle branding, they require certain ad spend. And so if you just go look into these franchise opportunities, it's not just the fee you got to pay for the license, for the rights to the brand and their territory. We have all these other expenses that are not necessary. I coach people to scale painting companies with almost no startup costs. So you have this huge amount of money up front that you need to pay. But the bigger kicker is the amount of money you pay per year, every single year for eternity in royalties. And the royalties are massive. The people who are really, really successful in business are really successful because of them. You're the one that built the business. It's not the systems they gave you. It's not the coaching and support. It's not what they offered you. The difference between someone who's wildly successful and someone who fails completely is the individual. And so the people who are wildly successful are successful because of them. But the more successful you are because of you, the more you pay the franchise. So at an 8% royalty in a $2 million business, you're paying out $160,000 per year in royalties, which is an outrageous number for what you basically captured all the value at the very beginning. So I think it's a massive overpayment. The third thing is they underdeliver. We're gonna come back to this one in a lot more detail because I think it's probably the most frustrating part is how often the promises made aren't kept, or a franchisee comes in thinking I'm gonna get all this support and then I'm significantly underwhelmed. There's a lot of over-promising, under-delivering, and when you are paying this much money and then it's under-delivered, that is brutal, which comes back to even a bigger gap between what you're getting and what you paid. The fourth issue is it's hard to scale. Now, we want to talk about this one in a little bit more detail. The first reason that it's hard to scale is because you're buying a limited territory, right? If you can only operate your business in like these 7 zip codes, you're really fundamentally limited geographically, which makes it a lot harder to scale. You have a smaller territory, you have a smaller population, there's less advertising you can do to reach all these people. So the solution to that is you can buy a bunch more territories. And I know people who have been sold 5 territories for $200,000 or $250,000 just so they could have a serviceable area. Guess what? If you start your own business, how much do you need to pay for a bigger territory? Zero. So I think it's, if you don't pay much, you're massively restricted. If you pay a lot, then you have more territory, but you're still restricted and you paid a fortune for that territory. So one problem is the limited territory. But the other reason you can't scale is because you don't have the margins. I want you to understand how you grow a company and what the profit margin should be. So if we look across, I'll use my industry, the painting industry as an example, for a company at scale. So we're talking 1 million to 2 million a year. Pretty standard profit margins are like 7 to 12%. Now, at my companies, we aim for a 20% profit margin. With the people I coach in my coaching program, we're aiming for a 20% profit margin, and we do that. And I have dozens of published case studies and a dozen companies that are hitting those benchmarks. So let's just take the case that you actually run a really profitable business at 20% net profit. Well, after royalty of 8%, you're left with 12% net profit, which means at $1 million, when you have the business fully staffed, right? You've got an estimator, a project manager, and an office manager. So you've actually built a business that gives you freedom. You're at 20% if you're running a healthy business. Then you take 8% off of that and you're making 12%. So you're making $120,000 max on $1 million business. If everything is like the industry benchmark, like most people don't get to this. The bad case, if you're running a company at 12% profit and you take 8% off that, you're making 4% profit. You're running $1 million company at 4%. Now, for some people, this $120,000, like, hey, that's not so bad. If I do 2 million, I can make $240,000. Yes, true, but that's only if literally everything goes perfect. If you have a bad year or a down year and that profit dips, then you're not making that profit. And it's not easy to get to this number. Most people don't get to those numbers. Also, your profit margin is gonna be lower when you're growing, because when you're growing a company, you first need to invest money in people who are not yet at full capacity. So for example, if I want to hire a project manager for $80,000 a year, when I hire that person, then I'm going to go through what I call the leverage gap. And so it's this period where you've invested resources into a person so the business actually gets worse temporarily before it gets better. And if you're operating at only 12% profit, so you're doing $1 million a year and you're earning $120K a year, and you need to invest into a project manager for $80,000, it drops your income so significantly in the short term that it makes growth actually a very risky thing to do, which is why the people I coach, I say you need to make 20% so that you have enough margin to invest in growing the business without it being a huge risk. But the 8% royalty that you're giving to a franchise makes those moves really risky, and you're literally at risk of making no money at all in an effort to grow the business. I think this makes it really hard to scale. It makes it really hard to get the business to a point where you're doing $3 million a year. And even if you're making 20% at $600K profit, after royalty, you're only making $320,000 a year, and you're paying roughly a little more than that, right? $360,000 a year is your take home, but you built that business because of you, and now you're paying $240,000 a year in royalties. It's absolutely bonkers to me. Number 5, I actually already touched on accident, which is limited territory. All right, which we already covered here. Now, there are other problems, we're gonna get into them, but these are 5 things that right away, this is why I think the model is fundamentally flawed, and I don't think it's set up for you to actually fulfill the promises made by a franchise in the first place. The promise is build a business, create freedom and all that, but freedom requires time freedom and financial freedom. And I don't know if you live in the United States right now, but things have gotten expensive. And to build a $3 million business to make $360 a year is almost no one's gonna get there. If you're only doing $1 million or 1.5 million and making 100, 150, there's no freedom in that. So I think the model itself is set up to actually make growing the business and achieving your goals much, much harder. And the only benefit is, yeah, but I've got all these things they promise, which brings me to the next point, which is what is a franchise promising? And then what do they often actually deliver? So this is what gets me really heated about the franchise model and why I anti-franchise. It's what they promise and then what they actually deliver. So let's boil this down. There's probably more to it, but we're gonna simplify this a bit with the main things that a franchise promises or pitches when they're trying to get someone to buy a franchise from them. The first thing that they're gonna promise is proven systems. And they might use other language to that. It might be our playbooks, our proven system, our business in a box, fill in the blank. Like, we already have a business model, it already works, we're gonna give it to you. That's the first thing that they promise. The second thing that they're gonna promise is coaching, support, and mentorship. Like, we've got all this other stuff that we're gonna do to help you and support you. The third thing that they're gonna promise is national brand. So we've already created this brand, you're gonna plug into this national brand, people know us, so you're already a leg up on your competition. They're gonna promise a national brand. The fourth thing that they're gonna promise is community. You're gonna tap into this amazing community of other business owners, so you're not doing it alone, and you've got not just support from us, but support from the community. The fifth thing that they promise, not in these exact words, but it's like, this is done for you. Or the illusion of, like, I'll call it an illusion later, but reduction of risk. Right? A lot of people everybody who's buying a franchise is buying it because they don't yet have a business. And starting a business can be scary. And when it's scary because there's a risk of failure. And so the biggest thing that is the selling point is, yeah, all of these things, but fundamentally it's risk reduction. When you sign up with us, you get proven systems, you get coaching and support, you get a national brand, you've got a community so that you don't have risk, so you're more likely to succeed. And because someone hasn't started the business yet, when you don't know about something, it seems a lot more complex than it is. And I think this is where, again, it's not intentional, but I think it's a little predatory. People are so afraid of the risk that they're willing to pay this massive premium for the risk reduction. But then once you're in it, it's like, oh, I didn't need to pay all that, but then it's too late. So now let's just look at the reality of this. So first, we want to look at proven systems. This doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything because you don't know the systems. Anyone can say proven systems. I'll give you a specific example. One of the people that I coach who bought a franchise told me that the playbook that they got for sales was 1 page. I'm not making this up. That sounds like you may hear that and be like, I don't even believe that. I know. Totally offensive. They literally had a 1-page document, was like, this is the estimate process. That was the sales training. So proven systems doesn't mean anything. Now, real quick, I want to highlight this black line down the middle. So there's this veil that is in this whole process. And there's 2 things that a franchise can kind of hide behind. One is they can hide behind the FTC disclosures. Oh, there's certain things that we can't say, we're not allowed to say per the FTC. We can't tell you some specific earnings. We can't tell, like, there's certain things they can hide behind because of an FTC disclosure. The second thing they can hide behind is it's proprietary. Like, you don't get to see the systems until you're in it. And again, I don't think this is people being nefarious. I think it's people who think, I built a good business and now I've franchised it. Boom. But I can tell you this, guys, I've built a pretty great painting company at this point. We have awesome systems. I've coached hundreds of painting contractors. And you know what, 7 years ago, we weren't trying to franchise. We did a partnership route because of the problems I talked about earlier. But let's be real here. Our system sucked. Like, the reason we haven't been adding more partners and scaling our company for the last 5 years is because we got real with ourselves and we're like, our systems aren't good enough. Like, I can't put my name on those. But I did trick myself for a few years thinking we had something figured out. And the evidence was, look at our success. Our success, therefore we have good systems, but the truth was the systems weren't good. So I don't even think this is nefarious. It's just, the systems might not be that good. All right, next thing is coaching and support. They might suck. So you don't know how good the coaches are, you don't know how good the support is until you're locked in. And the franchise isn't gonna say that. They're just gonna say, yeah, we have coaching and support. Yeah, our people are great. Yeah, they have this background. Yeah, this is the average amount of money per location. They're gonna say all the right things, but you don't actually know until you're in it. So another franchise that I coach, and I work with a number of franchisees from this franchise, was severely disappointed in the coaches. Their words to me were, none of them even have experience in the painting industry, and they come get coaching from me instead of from their franchise because the coaching they're getting from the franchise sucks. And so this sounds great on paper, but unless you know who is coaching you, then it doesn't mean anything. How good is the coach? And to be able to say we have this many locations and we're growing this fast and this is the average location doesn't mean anything. The number one marker for success is the individual who bought the franchise. It's not the coaches. Next up is the national brand. So this doesn't matter. Let me tell you why. First, a franchise is not advertising their brand in a location that doesn't yet have a franchise. So there is no brand. If they haven't opened a location where you're buying it, then there is no brand there. Why would they advertise to an empty market? They wouldn't. That would be like flushing money down the toilet. So in your market, that brand doesn't exist. It's just a name. And when you look at national brand, I just don't think there's a lot of value in it. Customers prefer a local brand to a national brand anyways. Customers don't know about the brand until you spend marketing dollars for them to know about the brand. And what a brand is it's a logo and some colors and a website. Like, brand hardly exists in this industry. You need to be a massive company before brand really matters. Mostly brand is the reputation you have with customers in your market, which gets built how? It gets built by you. It gets built by you spending money on marketing and delivering an exceptional experience to your customers, getting reviews, getting referrals, networking in your market. That's how a brand gets built. The fact that they already have one is not that valuable. You can literally hire somebody to make you a brand for very little money. So I think this is overvalued and it's not worth much. Next up is community. You can find community everywhere. So I have a coaching community of hundreds of painting contractors in our community. There's places you can plug in. There's Facebook groups online. There's masterminds you can pay for $5,000 or $10,000 or $20,000 a year, not $80,000 or $160,000 a year through royalties. So I think it's really easy to find and create community. There's the Painting Contractors Association. There's events. There's industry events. Like, there are so many ways for you to connect with community, not just in the painting industry, but anywhere, that this just isn't worth the money. So this isn't worth the money. This isn't worth the money. This is a huge risk because you don't know if it's going to be any good. And from my experience hearing from franchisees at least 5 different painting franchises, the coaching and support is not good. And then the systems you're taking a huge gamble on, but you can buy and tap into systems for a way lower price than you can through a franchise. The last thing here is this done for you or reduction of risk. So this, I think, is an illusion. I don't think it actually reduces your risk a whole lot. In some ways, I think it actually increases your risk because you're literally starting the business in massive debt, which means you're starting the business with payments going out every month. And that means the business is less profitable from day one. And you're starting the business with a 6 to 9% royalty on the business from day one, which just chops money right off the top of the business, which makes it way harder to grow, and it makes a down year way riskier. So what's the risk that it's really reducing for you? Well, it's an illusion. Like, yes, this stuff is all really good, but you can access all of these things. You can get proven systems in other places. You can get coaching and support in other places. You can build your own brand and your own reputation in your market. You can tap into community in a lot of places. You can do all of this, and there are far cheaper ways to get access to this stuff than the enormous amount of money you need to pay with a franchise. And what really frustrates me is that you don't get to see this until you're locked in. And so then some people might say, well, how come we don't know about this? Why doesn't anyone hear about this? And that brings me to our next point. And so I'm calling this gag orders. It's not really gag orders. The first thing is, let's talk about existing franchisees. Why don't you hear about this from existing franchisees? I'll tell you why. Because they literally own the franchise right now. So all these people, like, I know a lot of people. I'd love to bring them on and interview them, but guess what? I own a franchise for, Johnny's Painting. I don't want to talk bad about Johnny's Painting. Why? Because I don't want my franchisor getting pissed at me because I need them. I don't want to make my situation even worse. So if I'm an existing franchisee, I don't want to say bad things about my franchise. Not long ago, I had a individual who was going to start a business, and he was either going to work with Painting Business Pro or he was going to buy this franchise. And we said, hey, whatever you think. We said our thing. We said, here's a list of people you can call who've worked with Painting Business Pro. The franchise said, here's a list of people you can call who own a franchise with us. He called our list, 4 people. All 4 people responded to him that day with nothing but great things to say. Of the list he got from the franchise, no one even returned his call. Why? It's because they didn't want to say anything bad, but they didn't want to lie. All right, so existing franchisees are not going to talk bad. And if franchise only needs 1 or 2 happy people for you to talk to be like, look, they're happy. It's like, yeah, but what about all the people who aren't happy that you can't talk to because they don't want to talk bad about the franchise that they currently own? All right, so then we talk about ex-franchisees. I recently had a member, so there's a franchise that went out of business, and they had to sign papers that said they wouldn't say anything bad about the franchise. And this is pretty common if you sell the franchise, if you exit the franchise, like you have to sign paperwork like non-disclosure forms and stuff that you can't go and say bad things about the franchise. So essentially they're insulated from bad press. They're insulated from bad news. And if someone isn't successful, they can simply say, well, that person didn't do the work. Are you gonna do the work? And it's just this like total lack of accountability, which really frustrates me because I love people, I love entrepreneurship, I want people to succeed. And the amount of people I see being taken advantage of by franchises is upsetting to me because they're not succeeding, but the franchise is collecting their money on every single transaction that's happened in the business. So there's 3 things I want to end with. We want to talk about the promise, the problem, and the alternative. So the promise, fundamentally, a franchise is making is for results, right? They're saying, hey, you want freedom, you want to build a business, we're going to help you do that. We're going to help you with proven systems that we won't show you until you're in, with coaching that you don't know how good it is until you receive it, with a national brand that doesn't matter because you build your own brand, with a community which you can access anywhere, and we're going to make this risk reduction for you. So that's the promise. They're promising results. And that's really what it's all about. And for you, that's what it's all about. Like, I do want results and I don't want to do it alone. And so the problem though is just because I have been successful with a business doesn't mean I've built this other business. So here's what I mean. The problem is a painting company does not equal a coaching company. What I mean by that is just because someone can build a successful painting business doesn't mean they can build a successful franchise business. I see this happen all the time where people build a really successful first location in their painting business and then they're like, oh, let's just open a second location. And the second location is way harder. I went through this myself. We had successful painting companies. We had 5 successful painting companies we had started from scratch. And then we did like 18 startups that failed or we sold or didn't work out. Like, you can't just take your model and just like plop it into another business. We realized that we're actually building a totally different business, which is we have to build a business where we learn how to launch and scale companies and coach business owners in a number of different markets. So just because someone has had success at a painting company doesn't mean they're going to be successful at coaching people to run a lot of painting companies. And that's what a lot of people are leaning on when launching a franchise is I did it successfully once, therefore let me just give you these systems. But it's never that simple as much as we often think it is. And I'm speaking from my own experience, seeing it dozens of times and trying to do it myself. So the alternative here is if you want the results without the risk, there are so many other ways that you can get all the coaching, all the support, tap into everything, and own your future completely. You don't need to pay $40 or $50 or $100,000 to start the business. If you've got that kind of capital or access to capital, invest it into coaching programs. Invest it into masterminds. Invest it into events. Go build community and learn what you need to learn. Because what I would say is take that 100 grand and be like, cool, I've got a nest egg. I've got a year to figure this out. Or take that 100 grand and say 50,000, that's my living expenses. I'm gonna take the other 50 grand and learn. And then when you start investing all this money into things that aren't attached to a royalty, you get to learn everything that you need to learn, but you don't have to pay for it for eternity, right? You can actually develop your own business, your own skills. So as an example, self-promotion here is at Painting Business Pro, we charge a fraction of what franchises do. And from all the people I work with, People come to us because they get better support, better coaching, better systems from us than they do from their franchises, because we have actually proven that we can do what we do across many different markets with many different people, and we can do it at scale because I've been doing it for 12 years and we've gotten really good at it, and we do it in our own portfolio right now. So you can sign up for Painting Business Pro instead. Look, you can always cancel that and go be like, yep, I'm gonna buy the franchise. But the risk you're taking with buying a franchise is you're locked in. And if you're successful, you're paying an enormous amount of money over time. And these businesses are not easy to sell.